Congress saw no reason to make a concession which cut against the very basis of its creed. Jinnah now turned to the British, a last resort for so dedicated a nationalist who had devoted his political life to battling against the alien rulers. "It is not because we are in love with imperialism," Jinnah explained to his listeners at the annual League session in December 1938, "but that in politics one has to play one's game as on a chessboard." The British saw little attraction in a deal with a man who, besides being bitterly opposed to the federal scheme, seemed as trivial an enemy as he was lightweight as a friend. All this changed with the World War II. To fight a war from an Indian base, the British now needed both to hold firm at the center and reassert control over the provinces. If Congress proved to be an uncertain ally during the war, a way had to be found which combined the requirement that no concessions of substance to be made to it. The ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity now seemed the best guarantee the British could find against a united political demand. With his limited mandate from Muslim-majority provinces, Jinnah had a semblance of a right to speak for Muslims at the center. It still seemed unlikely that Jinnah could produce a demand which would seriously embarrass the British, and he had no power to create problems for the war effort in the Muslim-majority provinces, especially in the Punjab, the main recruiting ground for the Indian Army, and in Bengal, the Raj's Eastern Front against Japan. Viceroy Linlithgow's call to the Muslims to produce a constructive policy was an opportunity for Jinnah, the potential spokesman for Muslims at the center. Such a policy would have to walk a tightrope between the conflicting requirements of the divided constituents on whose behalf he was purporting to speak. In particular, Jinnah had to find a way of squaring the dominant interests in Muslim-majority provinces over which he had no control. At this juncture, his most urgent priority was to persuade everyone, the British, the Congress, and his own uncertain followers to accept his claim to be the sole spokesman for Muslims without being too precise about the demand. The Lahore Resolution was the result of this. The Punjab thesis was the most powerful influence in the making of the resolution. Zafrullah Khan's paper shows the lines of Punjab thinking. Zafrullah Khan, a distinguished lawyer from the Punjab and a member of the Viceroy's Executive Council, wrote it in the latter half of February 1940, sometime before the Lahore Resolution was passed next month. In it, Zafrullah was looking for a constitutional scheme acceptable to the Muslim opinion generally. He considered three schemes. The first was a scheme along Rahmat Ali's lines, which he swiftly dismissed as utterly impracticable. The second, closest to the League, envisaged two Muslim federations in Northwest and Northeast in direct relation with the Crown, but with treaty agreements with non-Muslim federation or federations to cover matters of common interest. Significantly, the separation scheme, as Zafrullah understood it, demarcated the Muslim federations not on communal lines, but along boundaries of existing provinces. This was the only way of safeguarding Muslim minorities in the non-Muslim federation or federations. While he argued that devotion to the principle of an all-India unity may in end prove too strong to permit wisdom and foresight to govern the situation, and the separation scheme might have to be abandoned, he hinted at the more pragmatic approach of an all-India federation. Zafrullah knew the British, he knew the Congress, he knew the real interests of the Punjab, but above all, he had the measure of Jinnah. This scheme envisaged a radically modified version of the 1935 provisions. Instead of an apportionment of powers between the center and the provinces had first to be replaced as sovereign units under the Crown, and then would delegate such minimum authority to the center as may be necessary to secure the workings of an all-India federation. Zafrullah's note was seen by Jinnah. Linlithgow thought it had been written specifically for adoption by the Muslim League. Lahore Resolution bears marks of this note. The resolution itself showed Jinnah's dilemma, that is, the delicate balance between what he wanted and what the Muslim majority provinces were after. The All India federal scheme would mean that the League would have to accept forever its role as a cipher at an impotent centre. It specified a construct of a centre which the majority provinces liked. In some respects, the separation scheme was less attractive. It envisaged two Muslim federations constituted out of the Muslim majority provinces, but in absence of an all India centre, it left minority Muslims high and dry. It envisaged the relationship between the federations made by treaties. It beggars belief that such a scheme would have recommended itself to Jinnah, whose entire career and thinking had concentrated upon the centre and getting Muslims a share of power in it. Only 2 months before the Lahore Resolution was passed, Jinnah had spoken of a constitution which recognized that there were in India two nations who both must share in the governance of their common motherland, that is, India. Jinnah took the logic of the provincial demand to its extreme and decided to espouse some features of the separation scheme while making no mention of the centre, its future shape and how it was going to be arrived at. Jinnah calculated that when eventually the time came to discuss an all-India federation, the British and the Congress alike would be forced to negotiate with organized Muslim opinion and would be ready to make substantial concessions to create or retain that centre. The Lahore Resolution should therefore be seen as a bargaining counter, which had the merit of being acceptable to majority province Muslims and of being totally unacceptable to Congress and the British. This in turn provided the best insurance that the League would not be given what it now apparently was asking for, but which Jinnah in fact did not really want. The resolution made no mention of partition, certainly none of Pakistan. Critically important resolution which said nothing about the centre might seem the greatest setback for a politician whose career had been committed to promoting a nationalist demand at the centre. The inwardness of the resolution was that Jinnah, with his characteristic political skill, took account of all the facts, not only present demands of strong Muslim majority provinces, but also the future constraints which he believed the British and the Congress and indeed himself would be able to put upon them. The contradictions inside the resolution and evidence of Jinnah's line of thinking can be seen in its 4th paragraph, which deals with minorities. Just as Zafrullah himself had envisaged, the resolution assumed that the boundaries of independent states would be in main the existing boundaries of the provinces. That would leave the Muslims in minority provinces outside Muslim autonomous and sovereign areas. By trading safeguards for non-Muslims in the Muslim-dominated units, the 4th paragraph asked for the protection of Muslim minorities in those units outside the Muslim sphere. It is significant that this paragraph talks of the constitution in singular and not of treaty arrangements to govern arrangements for both sides of minorities, Muslim and non-Muslim. In other words, Jinnah was keeping his options open for a constitutional arrangement, a singular constitutional arrangement, which would cover the whole of India. From the British point of view, the resolution was far from ideal because its demand for autonomous and sovereign units seemed to threaten the unity of India so dear to the British. The Viceroy was encouraged by Punjab governor's reaction that responsible Muslim opinion saw the resolution was a bargaining counter. H.V. Hodson, the Reforms Commissioner, made an acute assessment of the Muslim opinion. He held that the real point was that every Muslim leaguer interpreted Pakistan as consistent with the Confederation of India for the common purposes like defense, provided that Hindu and Muslim element therein stood on equal terms. Pakistan was a revolt against the notion of minority status with safeguards which relegated Muslims to being a Cinderella with trade union rights and radio in the kitchen but still below the stairs. The two-nation theory was a better way of describing Muslim aims than Pakistan, since it turned from safeguards and minority rights to the solid gains of national status. I. Chandigarh from Bombay, later the 6th Prime Minister of Pakistan, said that the object of the Lahore Resolution was not to create Ulsters, but to achieve two nations welded into a united India on basis of equality. Bold departure though it seemed to be, the resolution was hunting for an alternative to majority rule, not seeking to destroy unity of India. Jinnah himself often stated that Pakistan, with its connotations of partition, was not the League's idea, but a caricature thrust upon it by the Hindu press. Jinnah in 1943 said, "They fathered this word upon us." Earlier in November 1941, Jinnah told Nawab Ismail that he could not openly and forcibly come out with these truths because it is likely to be misunderstood, especially at present, adding that "I think Mr. Hodgson finally understands what our demand is." Nothing can be more revealing about Jinnah's eventual aims and objectives. Enter Sir Stafford Cripps with the British government's declaration. The Cripps scheme offered dominion status while allowing certain provinces to opt out of the Indian Federation. Cripps took a longer view of political futures. Congress and a strong centre were the best insurance the British could take out to prevent chaos and balkanization of India they proposed to leave. But giving Congress the strong centre it wanted was difficult to square with the provincial thesis of the Punjab and Bengal. Cripps' proposed solution was to give provinces, not communities, the right to decide whether to come into the Indian Union or not. For the British, it had the additional merit of showing what the logical consequences of Jinnah's unspecific demand for Pakistan were likely to be, and how feeble the League's grip was over its most important constituents, namely the Muslim majority provinces. By offering a provincial, not a communal option, Cripps hoped to provide a powerful incentive to those very constituents on whom Jinnah's strategy depended, to unhitch their wagons from the League's train.